Want to do better? Then it's time to change the story. Welcome to our show about new visions currently transforming the world through the confluence of art, tech, and innovation. And now your hosts, Michael Ashley and Neil Sahota.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Changing the Story. I'm really excited to introduce our guest today, Patrick Schwerdtfeger. He's a business futurist specializing in technology trends, including artificial intelligence, blockchain, and disruptive innovation. He's the author of Anarchy, Inc., Profiting in a Decentralized World with Artificial Intelligence and Blockchain, as well as 4 other books. He has lectured at numerous academic institutions, including Purdue and Stanford. He's also a regular speaker for Bloomberg TV, founder of Trend Mastery Inc., and the host of the Strategic Business Insights video blog. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thanks, Neil. I appreciate the introduction. I'm happy to be here with you today.
Thank you, Patrick. So as a visionary, what is the story that you'd like to bring to the world?
Well, I mean, we're in the middle of this, the time we're recording this, we're still in this quarantine from the pandemic. So things have changed very quickly all of a sudden. And it's actually remarkable, like the book that I wrote a couple of years ago talks about a whole bunch of trends of what's happening in the world and really primarily in the field of technology. And now it turns out that a lot of those, what's happening, it's not that we have new trends, it's that the trends that we have accelerated dramatically. So obviously I didn't predict the pandemic. No one predicted the pandemic that I know of. But the result of the pandemic has accelerated all these trends. And a lot of these, what kills me about what's happening right now, guys, honestly, is that this pandemic and the quarantine and the economic kind of catastrophe that we're in the middle of is just, I mean, it's going to hurt the bottom half of the population way more than the top half. Now, I'm not saying that the top half isn't going to be affected, and maybe all 3 of us are in the top half, whatever, but everyone's going to be affected one way or another. But the disproportionate impact on the low half of the population is just staggering and sobering for me, and probably for you, and for many of us. I kind of feel like I'm walking through like 3 feet of mud, just because it's just really hard to see what's happening. So anyway, change equals opportunity. And I use this metaphor. I have a new book that's going to be on Amazon next week, so the last book is, as you mentioned, Neil, is called Anarchy, Inc. And the new one is called Pandemic, Inc. So they're kind of sister books, if you will. And one of the metaphors I use in there is that, normally in life, you kind of picture your life and your environment, the economy, your job, just the reality of your existence as 100 blocks. And most of the time, 95 of those blocks are basically nailed down. For the most part, they're not really moving that much. There's really 5 or 6 or 7 that are in motion at any one point in time. Well, today we're exactly in the opposite situation. We've got like 95 blocks are in motion. Everything's in motion. Nothing's nailed down. We don't know anything. I mean, the whole thing is just, it's like you're in the middle of a raging river. There's nothing to hold on to. Everything's moving. And so that results in a heightened level of anxiety for people and stress. And that's what I referred to a second ago. Financial hardship, medical hardship, of course, is a huge one today. But the bottom line is that creates a lot of opportunities too, right? All of a sudden, anything is possible, and people are going to consider solutions they never even would have considered, 3 months ago. And there's an opportunity for leadership, and heroes will be made in this time. And so it's a question of, how do we step up? How do we be bold leaders? How do we re-envision tomorrow's economy? And that's what I'm trying to do with the new book, right? Obviously. And I think that's what you guys are doing with your podcast. There's an opportunity here for people to step up, and everyone, we are all searching for leaders, even those of us who are trying to be leaders. I'm trying to be a leader in some capacity, but I'm also in search of other leaders. I'm buying new books. I'm finding new people on YouTube that I can follow, and different podcasts like what you're doing. So we're all searching for leadership. We're all searching for guidance. and that's very, very exciting. And I think there's, the future holds a lot of opportunities for small businesses and self-employed people to stake their claim and redefine tomorrow's economy.
Well, that's awesome. I think opportunity is definitely the right word to use. So obviously, COVID has shown a light on all the weaknesses or good enough.
Yeah.
And I think we have the opportunity not to just to say that let's just revive things, but we could rebuild things in a more sustainable way, right? But there's an opportunity to not just be disruptive, but to do disruption because we actually need it. And I mean, Patrick, how would you suggest people actually start getting that mindset? How can they get rolling with this, opportunity they're being handed?
Well, everyone's gonna find their own way. Like no two people's. My contribution is going to be different than yours, Neil and Michael. You have a unique skill set as well. So we all kind of have a unique opportunity. But I think that the first thing, at least I'll tell you what I've been trying to do, is I've just been trying to hear as many different viewpoints as I can find and try and understand what is my viewpoint amidst all this noise. And there's so much, there's a lot of people who think this whole thing is just a big lie. Those people are out there too. And they're a sizable part of the population, a real percentage. So we have to be aware of those people. And so anyway, the new book is all about these kind of 8 trends that form a convenient acronym. The acronym is salvaged. So, which just kind of worked out, organically. But I'll tell you what they are just briefly.
Sure.
S is self-sufficiency, A, analytics, L is liquidity, V is virtualization. The second A is automation. G is government, which is playing just a huge role in the economy today. The biggest role of any individual participant is the government. So what can you sell to the government, or how can you help the government achieve? Even if you hate government, a lot of people hate government, but how can you contribute? Bottom line is there's still a customer or a potential customer. So how can you look at that? E is exponential thinking, and D is decentralization, which of course is the real, the crux of my previous book, Anarchy Inc. We have this kind of large macro trend towards decentralization. So anyway, the book is not designed to tell, you, Michael, or you, Neil, here's what you should do, because you're gonna know that yourself based on your own skill set, your past history and experience, and so on. But it's to say, here's what the trends are, here's what's accelerating, and there's a whole bunch of questions at the end of every chapter. There's a series of questions just to try and tickle the mind and be like, hey, these are things that you can think about. But let me offer one more thing, which maybe Michael doesn't, relate directly to your question, but it's something that I live by the axiom: the road to being is through doing. That business plans are completely worthless, in my opinion. Okay, but people create these business plans and they create step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But the only step that has any reliability really is step 1. Because once you finish step 1, most likely all the other steps are immediately invalidated because you learned something in the first step. So step 2 doesn't reveal itself until you're finished step 1. You have to do something. And the even if it's something small, right? Like creating this podcast. That is something that you are doing. That is within your control. You are taking a step forward. And in the process of doing that, you're going to learn things. And so even probably today, you already have perspective on what you're doing that you couldn't have had before you started what you've started, right? And the same thing is true for me. I didn't plan to write the book. It was a client who contacted me and wanted me to do a webinar on the pandemic and how businesses could survive the situation. So I did research, and even that didn't lead to the book. I wanted feedback on, because I created some PowerPoint slides and did a screen capture video of what I was planning to present to this group. And I put that on Facebook and LinkedIn, and it got a few hundred views, and I sent it out to an email list, and I got a bunch of feedback, and eventually a woman contacted me, and she is the producer for a television, it's a small regional television station in Atlanta, Georgia. and she wanted me to do an interview for them. So I did, and it went well. And they asked me to come back and do it again. And so I contacted a PR company that I worked with a few years ago and told her my contact there what had happened, and she was enthusiastic. And so she said she was going to send out a pitch the following Tuesday. And it was only on that Saturday in between right there where I was like, I should write a book to support her pitch, right? And then it was only actually the following week where I thought, you know what, I'm going to do the book either way, even if she doesn't get any response to the pitch. So, but the point is, it's organic, right? You take step one, all of a sudden step two becomes obvious and clear. And then you take step two, and now you have even a new perspective, and now step three becomes obvious. And once you've done that, step four, and it's an organic thing. So, as self-employed people, entrepreneurs, small business owners, or even executive decision makers for large companies, don't worry about creating a master plan. The situation's too fluid. Things are changing too quickly. Just do something. Do the first thing that's right in front of your face. Do that, and then analyze the heck out of it and see what happened. Did it work? Did it not work? And learn from it, and then decide what the next step is. And just organically be willing to let the path reveal itself along the way, rather than having a detailed plan up front.
Absolutely. Well, so actually, I want to talk about a different book that you wrote that I actually had a chance to read over January, which was Keynote Mastery. And so, you're a world-traveled public speaker, and I imagine you had a lot of events coming up before all this struck. So, for people that are public speakers, that was the major part of your living until this all began. I wonder, what is the new normal for that? What are your thoughts about innovating, especially for people that are doing public speaking in the age of COVID-19?
Yeah, well, I mean, but everything, I mean, it's gone, right? That career for the time being is gone. So, all my events were immediately canceled, and I have nothing. I mean, now I actually have some things on the calendar coming up, but the bottom line is, they're virtual for the most part. I've done a bunch of webinars and such. I have a couple coming up. But here's the deal. I mean, some people, and I know a lot of them actually, that once, we pass phase 2, phase 3, we open back up, they're going to go right back to business as usual without skipping a beat. I mean, I know a lot of people like that. They're not afraid of the virus. For better or for worse, I'm not saying that they should or should not be afraid of the virus. I personally am not really that concerned. I think, I'm healthy enough. If I got it, I haven't gotten it yet that I know of. And I think if I did, I'd probably be okay. But regardless of any of that, there's a percentage of the population, and we don't yet know what that percentage is, that is not going to feel comfortable going back out there and getting on a plane and going to a conference. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 30, maybe it's 40. I really have no idea. These are the questions. That's why everything is so fluid. We just don't know. But it's greater than zero, and I'm willing to bet it's greater than 10%. So there's going to be fewer events, and the events that exist are going to have fewer people, which means the budgets are going to be lower. So fewer events, lower budgets, which means that the size of the pie for people who earn, I earn over 90% of my income as speaking fees. So for the people in that bucket, the pie is going to shrink. So like the book, for example, so if the same number of speakers stay in the business and the pie gets smaller, then all of us on average are going to earn less, right? Our opportunity is going to diminish somewhat. So it was really important for me to get in front of this topic. Now, again, that wasn't a master plan going in, but as I started going down that path, I realized how important it was for me. And I mean, I'm a futurist. This is what I study trends. So it was a perfect fit for me. I mean, it made sense to try and make something of this, but it was really important to try and get in front of the topic because I'm protecting my career. Like everything I've worked for could be taken away. Right? That could easily happen. Is that it could all go away. And I've been very lucky. I struggled like crazy, Michael, as you know, for years. But the last, say 5 years, 6 years have been really, really good and nice and awesome and better than I expected even. And kind of shocking in a way. So anyway, for someone to, and I live in fear. I'm that type of person to begin with. I'm always worried that someone's going to come along and take it all away. And so now, like I'm terrified. Terrified is the wrong word, but I'm absolutely almost expecting that someone's going to take this away unless I figure out a way to redefine myself too. So, everything's going to go virtual. It's just a matter of time. It's already happened with Zoom, but here's the thing, Zoom and WebEx and GoToMeeting and Facebook's come out with something, and Google's got now their competitive platform. So they're happening all over, and I think they're more engaging and effective than the average person expects when they go in. Mm-hmm. Like even what we're doing now, it's pretty good, I think. Not bad, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's engaging, but at the same time, it's also not as good as in person, especially. There's just three of us. So we're all looking at the computer. We're one of three, and we know we're going to be on this video. So we have an incentive to look at that little blue light on the top of our computers or whatever it is on your machine. But, if there's 26 people or 200 people, right? Like people are moving around and they're, getting out of and then all of a sudden they come back again and a cat jumps on the lap of one of them, and all of a sudden you hear a dog barking or whatever, and so that it's not that engaging. And for the person who's speaking, or at that moment in time, it's incredibly difficult to stay focused when you can see all of these distractions on these little micro feeds, dozens of them on your screen. So it's not that engaging. So there's room for improvement. Now, what happens when virtual reality comes into the picture? Just the beginning of last year, Microsoft was awarded a $480 million order for augmented reality glasses for the military, Department of Defense. That is a leading indicator, right? It shows us where we're going. Mm-hmm. I have no idea how many headsets are involved, but you can bet that thousands, maybe tens of thousands of soldiers are going to be trained on using those headsets. They're part of the population, so their familiarity and expertise will propagate through their own circles. And we're getting close. We've been talking about VR for a decade, but we're finally getting close to true deployment and broad market adoption. And I'm sure both of you have tried it. I've certainly tried it. It is incredibly immersive and engaging. When you're wearing those glasses, like the cat walking in your room does not exist. Right. Like you are in that other world. And imagine going to a conference where you can, virtually walk down the hallways of a convention center and bump into other avatars, people who you've met before, and you immediately have, a synopsis of your previous interactions, and you can talk to that person over your microphone and headset and engage with them and go to a session and see people around you. That is going to change. Arguably, those virtual experiences will be even more engaging than the real world. So, we've got the real world today. We've got Zoom, which is not bad, but it's kind of below the real world. And then VR could be literally better than the real world. And just, one little thing that, I always think about, how is this likely to play out? And once a VR headset gains broad market adoption, so that a lot of people are using them, there's going to be a mad dash for every business to consumer, B2C company to develop increasingly immersive and creative and unbelievable experiences, which will be available on their websites as part of their marketing funnel to engage potential customers, right? And so, there's going to be, people are literally going to be able to spend all day, every day, like kids probably to begin with, but it'll go, like Ferrari will have some unbelievable experience where you can go through a racetrack, and Disney will have like the Lion King where you can talk to, Simba or whatever. There's just going to be, hundreds, thousands of different experiences. And people will be like, oh, did you see the one that Coca-Cola did in the Arctic with the polar bears? I mean, there's going to be tons. And so people are going to, spend a lot of time. There's a lot of people who have like really maybe not so happy lives, right? And they're not, the real world is not that fun for them. It'll start with that. If you think about it like a pyramid, it'll start kind of at the bottom, the people who are frustrated in the real world, but it'll move up as these experiences just get better and better and better. It's going to, draw in an increasing percentage of our population, who will willingly leave the real world behind in favor of a virtual world that's more engaging for them. And we've heard these stories already with video games and so on, but we are just getting started. And that is, it's an opportunity perhaps, but it's kind of a dystopian future. So there's both sides where we're going to see it play out.
I think you're actually onto something here, Patrick, because I looked at COVID-19 is turning into an accelerator for some things that Michael and I both teach part-time at different universities, and people are always talking like online classes, it'll probably happen 10, 15 years down the road, and suddenly overnight we had to do it. Now you have people actively talking about, well, maybe we should start thinking about virtual classes for the near future to create better engagement. It's been kind of an eye-opener. I mean, I think this really speaks to the opportunities you're talking about, and we all have those different perspectives. There's probably an accelerator for everybody out there to try and find, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you talk about the online education. My girlfriend has a 6-year-old boy, and so we've been watching, how that's been handled, and they have these adaptive learning platforms where, the system knows if you got something wrong, if you're struggling with the content, it automatically redirects you into kind of a subroutine where you can learn that better, and then it brings you back to the primary lesson plan, and the next time you have a problem, it does it again. And so what was happening is you no longer have a need for being tested. The question is not what was your score on the test. The question is what level are you on? Because you can only get to the subsequent level once you've demonstrated proficiency with the previous level. And so we see this with kids. And so then I think, okay, what's likely to happen for the traditional education route? Colleges and universities, which are so insanely expensive, and student loans and so on. So that's a very broken system, ripe for disruption. So what's the future going to be? Well, it's not going to be driven by the colleges and universities, because there's so much competition, particularly in the STEM fields, for good talent, that the companies like Google and Microsoft and Facebook, they've already developed their own online learning platforms to train their own people. And things are changing so fast that even if you have a degree, it doesn't at all mean that you're qualified to do what we have to do next month or next year, because things change that fast. So it's a necessity for them to have these online learning platforms. And they're going to just, driven by the profit motive, they're going to incorporate every innovation that they can find to make those learning platforms as effective as possible, which means the adaptive learning piece is being incorporated into those platforms as well. So once we get a few stories of 19, 20-year-old kids that didn't go to university or college at all, but got hired at Google or Facebook because of God knows what, and ended up with a good job paying $100,000 a year or more, whatever that number is. Like, there's success stories in corporate America without going to university, right? Once we get a few of those success stories in the following, let's say 10 years, right? That's really how long disruption. People think, it takes 20, 30 years to disrupt an industry. It's not true at all, and not even recently. Like the car completely replaced horse and buggy literally in 13 years. So within 10 years, you can completely turn an industry upside down. So all we need is a few of those stories of these kids that end up doing really well without going to university and college, and all the future. The people who are currently in high school, graduating in a year or two, they're going to say, screw that. I'm not going to university or college. I don't need to. I can do it another way and save myself, 200 grand or 100 grand or 400 grand or whatever that is, and get there sooner and faster and without all that bullshit. So, there's a lot of stuff coming, right? All these things are coming, and they're going to come a lot faster than people think.
Well, so, to that end, before we wrap up, could you give us a few more things that are coming just down the road that people might not be aware of? Because this was very eye-opening about virtual reality, and especially the grading aspect. I hadn't thought about that. A few more things that people may not see that you see that's coming. People aren't aware of.
Well, I mean, the big one for me is the automobile sector and transportation in general. And obviously, everyone immediately goes to the autonomous driving piece. And I think that's coming very quick, for sure, faster than people think. I think level 5 autonomy will be approved. The regulators will approve it probably 2023, I'm guessing, so 3 years from now. But the bigger piece is the transition from gas vehicles to electric vehicles. Because the gas vehicles have, on average, about 2,000 moving parts. Electric vehicles have less than 100. That's a 95% reduction in moving parts. So that completely changes the production lines, simplifies the production lines. It simplifies the aftermarket service, auto body parts and that sort of, the requirements. Guys, there's a truck outside. I'm sure you can hear it beeping in the background. I'm sorry, that's just Murphy's Law. But
no problem. We'll see what we can do in post.
But the microphone probably picks up that beeping like louder than my own voice, so I apologize for that.
No worries.
Anyway, so there's going to be a dramatic simplification of the manufacturing process and service industry for automobiles. But the single most expensive part in an electric car is the battery. And we've been mapping the cost reduction curve of battery technology for years. It's dropping by 12, 13, 14% per year right now. And so you can very easily project forward and anticipate when it will literally be cheaper to buy an electric car than a gas car. And that's likely to happen also around 2023. But that doesn't even take into consideration that electricity is 90% cheaper than gas on a per mile basis, which means that the lower overall cost of ownership will hit around 2021. And the service expense after purchase will also be less. So late last year, October, I think, Amazon announced that it was purchasing 100,000 electric delivery trucks from Ravion, which is an electric car startup here in the United States. That's another leading indicator. They made that decision because they're going to save money by doing it, which means that 1,000 other corporations that also have delivery trucks will, in the next 2, 3, 4 years, make the same decision, right? Which means we're going to see a massive shift. I mean, literally in the next 2, 3 years, we're going to see a massive shift. And by 2025, it will make absolutely no sense at all to purchase an ICE's internal combustion engine, a gas vehicle. It won't make any sense to make that purchase. And the last element of that, in fact, there's 2 more elements if we have time, but one is that transport as a service. So you have autonomous driving on one side, you've got electric vehicles on the other. The inevitable, you combine those two and you end up with companies that will offer transportation as a service. So where you literally, you can call a car just like you call an Uber today, and a car comes and picks you up and it's autonomously driven and it's an electric vehicle. And the cost of that, so roughly 70% of your Uber rates go to the driver. So you can eliminate that. And then meanwhile, it's not going to go down by 75% because the Uber has to actually buy the vehicles, which they don't have to do today. So let's say it goes down by half right there. And then the electric part is 90% cheaper than gas on a per mile basis, and service is even cheaper. So you can take 90% of 50% and you end up with a 95% reduction on a per mile basis. So between 90 and 95%. So today, the average cost per mile on Uber or Lyft is about $2 a mile on average. Well, we can expect that to go down to between 10 and 20 cents. And Elon Musk just recently said that their robo-taxi service, they're expecting it to be roughly 18 cents a mile, which is right in that range. So we can expect that to be much cheaper, which means like most people won't even bother buying a vehicle at all. And companies like Uber will use Wall Street money to buy 100,000 all at one shot. And so they're going to be entire fleets. So people think, oh, it's going to take a long time for this to propagate through because people only buy a vehicle once every 10 years or whatever it is on average. But that's not true at all, because it's going to be these companies that are going to buy 100,000 at a shot. And that doesn't even include, the average car is parked 94% of the time. Autonomous cars can drive 90% of the time. So we need fewer cars to replace the actual mobility, like what the actual level of transport. We don't need as many vehicles because the vehicles we have can be driving more often. So this whole thing is going to turn upside down, and there's a whole bunch of different implications. More traffic because it's cheaper to get around, less parking because those cars don't have to be parked most of the time. Oil prices will stay low because demand is going to go down. Demand only has to drop by 5 to 10% for the oil price to collapse, and we're seeing that right now. So oil prices are going to stay low for a long, long, long time. It'll probably never come back to what they have been in the last 10 years, certainly. So there's just, and these big auto companies are going to most likely collapse. There's going to be a couple of exceptions. Tesla is incredibly well positioned, and a few others are as well. But a lot of big changes, and it's exciting, but it does mean that there's going to be failures, and there's going to be new companies that are going to grow dramatically to fill the void left behind by those failed companies.
Absolutely. Hey, that's fantastic. Patrick, how could people learn more about you, what you're up to, what's going on in the world? What's the best way to connect?
Yeah, thank you, Neil. My full name, my website address is patrickschwerdtfeger.com, which I know is a stupid choice for a domain. You can actually go to bookpatrick.com and it should forward, but I've even had some problems with that recently. So anyway, if you're watching this video, you probably see my name somewhere. The website is patrickschwerdtfeger.com. It's targeted towards companies that are hiring speakers. So it's not really, there isn't a lot there like to purchase, for example, but my new book's coming out, Pandemic Inc. By the time you put this on YouTube, probably it will be on Amazon. I'm expecting it to be up there in a week or so, maybe less. And certainly if anyone has any questions, go to my site and click on the contact tab. Again, it's designed for events, but just send me a note that comes right into my own email box. And I'd certainly love to hear from anyone who's curious about these topics.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on our show, and we look forward to reading that book.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael, for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hey, if you like today's show, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment.
If you've been enjoying the Changing the Story podcast series, please subscribe and share it with your friends.
Thank you.